Egypt, with its mysteries and a history spanning over 3,000 years, is a land that enchants us, taking us back to a glorious past where more than 300 pharaohs ruled the greatest empire of their time. Among these pharaohs, one stands out as truly different. In fact, her reign was synonymous with peace, prosperity, and artistic and architectural innovation. She is Pharaoh Hatshepsut, a ruler unlike any other because she was a woman. She ruled Egypt for 22 years, the only female pharaoh to achieve such a long and prosperous reign. Her era became a source of inspiration for women, and she remains one of the greatest pharaohs of ancient Egypt. But how did a woman ascend to the highest position in an empire traditionally ruled by men? Hatshepsut came to power through a coup, seizing the throne that was already occupied. She carefully planned her path to become the sole ruler of Egypt. Don't forget to support us, my friend. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. In 2007, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt stated that he was certain he had identified the mummy of Hatshepsut. However, this view is not shared by scientists who were astonished by this conclusion, as the burial position was associated with a king. Therefore, it is not expected that she would be buried in this manner. Investigating Hatshepsut's life takes us on a wonderful journey to the past, over 3,500 years ago. Why was her name erased from history? Why were her monuments systematically defaced? Who is responsible for this? The persecution of the Queen is part of an effort to rewrite history. Through statements from witnesses, we uncover the truth about this extraordinary ruler. We gained insight into her personality, which is rare in ancient Egyptian history. If I could meet someone from ancient Egypt, it would be Hatshepsut. It is time to solve the remarkable riddle of the Pharaoh Queen. In 2007, in Cairo, the Minister of State for Antiquities, Zahi Hawass, held a conference where he made a stunning announcement. I can tell you that this is the most important discovery since the discovery of Tutankhamun in the Valley of the Kings. He revealed the identification of the mummy of one of the greatest rulers of the ancient world, known as Hatshepsut. This statement sparked debate and raised doubts among many Egyptologists. Could this mummy truly be Hatshepsut, or might it belong to someone else? The evidence presented by Zahi Hawass was remarkable, but when analyzed scientifically, it proved inconclusive. Why then is there so much interest in Hatshepsut? Specialists agree that she was one of the most prominent rulers of the ancient era, yet she remains unfamiliar to many. To understand this, we must return to the period when the world rediscovered her existence. In the 19th century, an obsession with Egyptian antiquities captivated the West. People were eager to learn everything they could about this civilization and unravel its secrets. All of this became possible thanks to Champollion's groundbreaking discovery. By deciphering the hieroglyphs, he gave the pharaohs a voice. He was the first to read the hieroglyphic inscriptions, and everything he encountered during his travels in Egypt brought a wealth of new knowledge. Champollion discovered the temple of Deir el-Bahari, which at the time was covered in sand. He observed depictions of two pharaohs, which was astonishing, as it was unusual to see representations of two pharaohs together. What surprised him even more was that one of these pharaohs was referred to in the feminine form. This revelation left him in great confusion, as it suggested that this pharaoh was a woman. This woman was none other than Hatshepsut. It takes 20 years to uncover more secrets of this temple on the west bank of the Nile. During the cleaning of the second terrace, archaeologists discovered inscriptions that take us back more than 3,500 years. There is an important collection of inscriptions in Deir el-Bahari, known as the lineage of the gods, which describes the sacred conception of Hatshepsut by the god who may have been her father. The inscription, known as the Divine Union, depicts the marriage of the god Amun to Queen Hatshepsut's mother. Carved on the temple walls is a legendary scene from another era. narrating the myth of the conception of this extraordinary woman, Hatshepsut. Amun, referred to as her consort, was the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Thutmose I. He found the queen asleep in his beautiful palace. She awoke to fragrant offerings. In truth, Amun had allowed her to see him in his divine form. His love passed into her body, and the palace was filled with a divine fragrance. She knew she was carrying a very special child. A small, hidden bump revealed her pregnancy, a truly extraordinary event. Hatshepsut was not the first queen to claim to be the daughter of Amun. However, for a pharaoh to present himself in a divine form was an exceptionally rare and bold occurrence. This divine conception was revolutionary and foretold an extraordinary destiny for Hatshepsut. It took decades before uncovering the full extent of the reign of this pharaoh. Excavations carried out by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the early 1920s revealed more about Hatshepsut. In the early 1920s, Herbert Winlock undertook excavations on behalf of the Metropolitan Museum and made significant discoveries related to Egyptian history and art. Outside Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, Winlock discovered a massive pit known as Hatshepsut's Pit, filled with broken sculptures. He found himself facing a massive mystery in the form of statues of Hatshepsut that once adorned the Queen Pharaoh's temple at Deir el-Bahari. These statues appeared to have been deliberately removed and destroyed. Someone seemed intent on erasing her name from the inscriptions on the temple walls. In some cases, they even gouged out her eyes to obliterate her gaze. But who wanted to hide her memory, and why? In 1961, a Polish team began excavating the temple to free it from the sands. During the cleaning and restoration of its corridors, Hatshepsut emerged once more in her story, carved into the walls, dating back over 3,500 years. At the beginning of the New Kingdom, Egypt entered an era of prosperity following a long period of turmoil. Egypt had been occupied by foreign rulers known as the Hyksos, who governed northern Egypt for 100 years, less than a century before Hatshepsut's reign. This was a deeply painful memory for Egyptians, as it marked the first time in their history they were ruled by foreigners. During this period, Pharaoh Ahmose I succeeded in expelling the Hyksos from the delta and reclaiming Egypt. Afterward, Thutmose I ascended the throne with the task of strengthening power and completing the mission initiated by Ahmose. He married Ahmose, who became the royal wife. After having 2 sons, they had a daughter, Hatshepsut. Her name, meaning foremost of noblewomen, reflects her parents' love for her. There could be no more fitting name for someone destined for such an extraordinary fate. Hatshepsut used the walls of her temple to narrate one of the most significant events of her youth. She recounts that her father took her, instead of one of his sons, to the Delta region in the Northern Empire to present her to the people, nobles, and gods. As a young girl, Hatshepsut accompanied her father, Pharaoh Thutmose I, to Lower Egypt, where she saw the statue of the god Amun. Amun spoke to her, proclaiming her as his daughter. Amun declared that Hatshepsut was destined to rule Egypt and was her father's heir. This announcement caused a stir within the family, as the pharaoh had chosen her as his successor. In fact, Hatshepsut played a significant role during her father's reign. As a woman, it was not expected that she would ascend the throne. However, with the early deaths of her brothers, Thutmose I had no male heir. This made the son of a secondary wife, Thutmose II, the heir. To avoid succession disputes, it was decided to marry Thutmose II, the future king, to his half-sister Hatshepsut. At the time, sibling marriage was seen as preferable to a division of power between competing branches of the royal family. For Egyptians, the ideal situation was for the throne to pass to the eldest son of the great royal wife. The lack of a male heir created a problem and raised questions about who would succeed the pharaoh. The primary purpose of this marriage was to produce a male heir, who would be seen as more legitimate since he would be born to both the son and daughter of the previous king, Thutmose I. Upon the death of Thutmose I, Thutmose II ascended the throne, with Hatshepsut by his side as great royal wife, effectively the Queen of Egypt. The great royal wife was the first and most important wife of the pharaoh, wielding political and religious authority. However, her influence was tied to her ability to produce a male heir. Being a pharaoh, on the other hand, meant holding supreme power. Unfortunately, as had occurred during Hatshepsut's father's time, the great royal wife did not bear a son but a daughter named Neferure. Meanwhile, Thutmose II fathered a son, the future Thutmose III, with a secondary wife. After a short reign, Thutmose II died at the age of 25. His young son, Thutmose III, succeeded him as the new pharaoh. However, the child was only 4 years old, far too young to rule. Although crowned with the title of king, he required a regent to govern on his behalf. With the approval of the ruling elite, Hatshepsut took on the role of regent alongside Thutmose III until he reached an age suitable for ruling. As the daughter of Thutmose I and his wife, Hatshepsut was a strong candidate for this position. The power of the greatest civilization in the world now rested in the hands of a child. Would Hatshepsut, who had grown up with her father's dreams of achieving greatness, remain in the shadow of this child? To understand this, we go to Sahel Island near Aswan. In the Aswan region, at a large granite quarry, there is a very unusual and rare inscription. It depicts Hatshepsut as a strong woman and the Queen of Egypt, but she is shown alongside the chief architect named Senenmut. From this inscription, we learn that Hatshepsut ordered the construction of a pair of obelisks. This is remarkable and unprecedented. One must be an Egyptologist to fully appreciate the boldness represented by this engraved image in Aswan. These are massive monuments, and no one but a pharaoh could undertake such large-scale projects. Traditionally, the pharaoh would dictate orders for constructing a building or erecting an obelisk. However, Hatshepsut commissioned the construction of the 2 obelisks in her name, not in the name of Thutmose III. We can see her overwhelming ambition as she is about to ascend the steps of the pharaoh's throne. Hatshepsut assumed a position that was not rightfully hers, and if she intended to seize power, she could have dispensed with her stepson, Thutmose III. Perhaps Hatshepsut was very thirsty for power and did not like Thutmose III, her stepson. Maybe she did not care much for him. To understand the reason, let us go to the Karnak Temple and the Nigari Minu Temple, which was built by Hatshepsut's orders. When Thutmose III ascended to the throne in ill health, she did not give him enough time to transition into power. Instead, she sent him to join a military school here in the south of the capital, in the city of Thebes. Everything was under her control. Once the pharaoh was out of the way, Hatshepsut saw herself as the sole rightful figure to appear in temple inscriptions as the ruler. To consolidate her power, she had to dispense with several agreements, including assuming a throne already occupied. As a regent, her authority had limits, and one day, Thutmose III would demand his legitimate right. To justify her seizure of power before the Egyptians, Hatshepsut needed the support of the greatest authority, the gods. The only way to become a pharaoh was to be appointed by the god Amun himself. In the Karnak temple, north of ancient Thebes, the walls of the Red Chapel, built by Hatshepsut, reveal other secrets and tell us of prophecies, another source used to legitimize her rule. Hatshepsut utilized prophecies in which the god Amun appeared to her. Hatshepsut recounts an extraordinary story that occurred before she assumed power. During the festival of the god Amun would leave his temple in Karnak, located in Thebes, and travel in a procession to Luxor temple. Amun would be seated in a small shrine carried by priests, according to ritual. The god would increase the weight of his shrine on the priest's shoulders, signaling which direction he wanted them to go, left or right. Along the way, the god Amun appeared, though no one could see him as he remained within his shrine. Suddenly, the shrine's bearers came to a halt, as though a hidden force had frozen them in place. The shrine tilted toward Hatshepsut. The priests and onlookers were stunned. The god spoke to the queen in this pivotal moment. She quickly stepped forward and knelt before her father, the god saying, "What do you want me to do to protect Egypt?" The shrine tilted again toward her, expressing Amun's approval. The god declared her pharaoh. To us, this seems like an elaborate trick, with the priests controlling the shrine's movements to install Hatshepsut as pharaoh. But to the ancient Egyptians, it was entirely different. The people of that time were compelled to go along with and believe in the priest's display. Thus, Hatshepsut was crowned queen. For some, her coronation was seen as a crime, and they sought to erase her from history, obliterating her memory and even her image. But what did the queen's face look like, this woman they tried so hard to erase?